So, a gentleman who I know through watching Snake Plisskenist's videos, who's named Piro, has done a video in reply to me titled, "The Right to Bear Rocket Launchers," and I thought, well, the title like that, I have to do this live, so let's see how this shapes up.
So I just watched the Hyperbole math video on gun control. I'm going to reply to something I got Chris. And there's a lot of details in there I could get in there, just I don't know the way he approaches it, and maybe your foreigners don't understand, so shut up, I'm just kidding, whatever. But,
I think that's actually what I was talking about, is when she had expressed her ignorance on the subject, saying, so what the fuck kind of moment for her. And I was talking about what it is that one normally does in the face of overwhelming ignorance, which is to learn something about it before telling people what to think or what your opinion is, learning something about the subject, or barring that, having the common decency to shut the fuck up. Anyway.
Integral math. I find that interesting. Thank you so much for making a video. It confirms my point that people like to argue about this. You take many of the things you will bring up, I also bring up, and you choose to, like, try to find little things, imagine differences. Like Piro believes that a knife could be an assault rifle. That can't be a joke, he must think that way. But as for this part, later in your video, you act like I'm trying to shut you up, and you're like, I'm going to say what I think. Is that okay, massa? But you make a defense of telling other people when to shut the fuck up. I never said you should shut the fuck up, but you take me to be saying that.
Do continue?
The main thing that annoys me about this is it's like a lot of these issues, people just love to go around and around about them. You can point out, hey, wait, stop here somewhere.
Yes, and you like to talk about the way people talk about things.
Yes, I do like to talk about things. Like right there, I noticed that you paused my video right when I was saying that people, if you say that, hey, here's an area and you cut me off. And the next word is agree. Yeah, I do. I find it interesting. And the basic position there is that I think we would be better off trying to, that we might find questions that are interesting rather. I think that's straightforward enough to understand.
Instead of talking about the subject.
I'll stop.
So like that. What's that? Instead of talking... No, I talk about how we talk about them, and I talk about the issues as well. I go on to talk in this video about a particular issue you continue to avoid, though you run some words around it at the end about how we pretend to be the founding fathers. Oh, and also lineage, because we don't want to be stuck with muskets, right? Instead of engaging those issues as they really exist, you play these kind of games. You complain I don't talk about the real issue, just about how we're talking about it. Actually, I'm talking about how we talk about it, because that's why we have these problems going around in loops, and people need to spend some time trying to agree what the questions are and stop obsessing about their fucking answers. And yeah, none of that means I don't have my own answers. I do, and they're better than your guys' answers. One better thing is that I know the questions to get to the meat of the issue. You're arguing with Christina about the Second Amendment, and it's just a law, we can change it, and no, but until we change it, and that has nothing to do with it. We're actually trying to discuss where we want to draw the line and why. You want to say, well, we pretend to be the founding fathers and we do what we imagine they wanted. Well, okay. I'm not quite on board with that, but I am aware of the history of this, and that's why I bring up the militia aspect. Because that militia dream is not just something called militias. The idea is you wouldn't need a standing army. Some of them thought standing armies led to corruption, and having a militia as a way to defend your nation was an alternate. We're not doing that alternate. We got the second half of the Second Amendment with people zealously defending it, and great, because I support that amendment. I'd like some of that energy on the militia part. That's a real issue, right, that I'm raising. You just make light and try to... What could he possibly mean? Oh, we don't know. Okay, well, it's a real issue. You're pretending not to see it. That's your choice.
Well, look, I support the Second Amendment. I'm an American. Well, look, I support the Second Amendment. I'm an American. Well, look, I support The Second Amendment. I'm an American.
See, you laugh that off like that's inconceivable. But I do support the Second Amendment. You're assuming that since I am bringing up the rocket launcher issue, I must not. That's my angle to... No, I support it, but I just recognize that we're discussing where to draw the line, right? So I consider it obfuscation to go other places or to ignore issues like this, like, what do you support the Second Amendment? I'll ignore that. Right.
I'm an American. I like shooting guns and things, targets. I believe it's probably worthwhile. Like having cars, you might have some deaths, but none of that matters. That's not really...
Okay, we're like a minute in, just so you know.
An issue.
My video you're replying to is 3 minutes and 8 seconds long, and yours is what, 9 minutes plus? So, I had just... What you just decided not to comment on is where I said, I support the Second Amendment. I like shooting guns. And you're like, furrowed forehead, what? Cannot compute. You know, you're kind of slow, Piero. You're already 1 minute in to your video. I'm 3 minutes into mine. Okay.
Unless you think the Second Amendment means you can have shoulder-fired rocket launchers, bazookas, tanks.
Gosh, do I get my own nukes too? How big is this list?
Well, it's potentially a very big list, isn't it? And the point is where to draw the line. Now, I can imagine actually all of those kinds of weapons I mentioned being kept by American citizens. Well, maybe not the nuclear arms. Those are kind of special. Like you say, you want to get those up in the air. But really, in principle, anything. If we had the whole Second Amendment, I could imagine citizens trusted to keep fully armed tanks, just in case, armored vehicles. Some of this equipment could be useful in natural disasters if it was already distributed out there in the neighborhoods and rural areas just as well as everywhere else.
Then there's some line.
Oh,
For the kind of arm.
because that's the list. Some line to the kinds of arms.
Right.
Right.
And also,
yeah, there is a limit to it. And the way that one might go about learning about this...
Integral math, let me stop you right there. I'm full aware of how you might learn about this. And you're proposing one way. You can also just think about the question of arms from a contemporary point of view. On the other hand, I do agree with you. I believe in looking into the history of the idea. We can judge the Second Amendment and decide to cut it out of the Constitution. I support it, so I don't want to do that. I think there's a way to understand it, and it has to do with this dream of not having a standing army. Now, maybe that dream at that absolute level is gone, and I don't actually picture that. I see more like in firefighting, where you have dedicated professionals full-time, but you also have a volunteer. Like, I'm from California. You know, I've almost always worked with some guy that was a volunteer firefighter and had his radio. In the middle of the day, if there's a fire, he runs out and helps. We're all into it. We all get to help by saying, yeah, go do it. So I think the whole Second Amendment and the militia, something that well organized, is useful. Okay, I think that is useful. Now you're going to tell me, well, you should understand. Well, you can't recognize that I'm bringing a founding father issue. Okay, I just happened to read the Benjamin Franklin essay, so that's relevant. Biographies, a Benjamin Franklin biography, so that's relevant because he organized militias. That's the kind of militia organization we're talking about, something the service of the military. You go off later, like, because I say I want my militia. Well, it's like I want my Second Amendment right. I'm talking about as a citizen, not a personal militia I control. That's not the well-regulated kind. I want one in service to my nation. A distributocracy of defense. You know, I would think you might find it beneficial if you want to make progress on these ideas, to engage such a position. Said you seem to want to pigeonhole me as, no, you're against the Second Amendment, that's why you're on that side. No, I support the Second Amendment. I grew up in the West.
Is by being familiar with the society that did the ratification of the Bill of Rights, generally, or in particular the Second Amendment here. And that's not at all that difficult to do. So you would know what was meant by the term arms.
See, I think I do know that integral math. And I think you know as well, because of things you say later, that that's fraught with some difficulties unless you want to be limited to a musket. So you go the lineage. Well, none of that is as obvious as you're going to want to say, given the style you like to present your ideas. It is open to debate. It is legitimate. But it is not obvious. It is not obvious that it wins against other arguments that also are admissible.
By the society that did the ratification of the amendment. Barring that, there's just Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, which is another avenue by which you could go about finding out what it means.
Okay, great. So you want to appeal to federalism. I'm a federalist too. Awesome. You don't seem to get. I think that people could have fully armed tanks and machine guns, but it requires a regulation matrix under which you could actually claim to have a well-regulated militia. What are you not getting about that? Is that above the realm of what you're used to arguing about? Yeah, probably, because I'm saying we need different questions. The question is, what is that regulation matrix? All you guys going, no regulation, because regulation means infringement. No, it's a different word. It means something different.
In particular, the D.C. versus Heller decision and Chicago versus McDonald.
To me, the crucial part of those cases that has a bearing here is that you can't infringe the right of a U.S. individual to bear arms just because there's no fucking well-regulated militia. It doesn't change the fact that the amendment still calls for a well-regulated militia, right? And with such a well-regulated system of defense, you could definitely support and protect the right to bear arms, right? If certain people in the militia, which was well-regulated, were so trusted by various means that they were a private-public crossover into our security infrastructure, of course they could probably keep arsenals that would be used if we were invaded, and possibly equipment that we would use if we were invaded, and possibly equipment that we would use in case of any emergency. It's a real point. Answer that. It's fruitile. It's futile. It's futile to your way of looking at things. Or obsess on the fact that I made up the word futile.
I want my regulated militia. That amendment says that's necessary for my freedom, so what?
You want your own regulated militia. Well, go get one. I'm not standing in your way.
Or is it? Right, why is that the only part of the Second Amendment that's important? I think it'd be good to have a well-regulated militia.
A well-regulated militia, or your own well-regulated... that amendment...
I think you're just trying to be confused, Integral Math. You're just trying to be confused. Right? It should be obvious I'm talking about my well-regulated militia as a citizen of the United States, as a subject of the United States Constitution. Right? That's a question that you're just avoiding by, what do you mean? You are conflictifying yourself. No. I am saying there's an issue, and I'm challenging people such as yourself to tell me if you support that part of the Second Amendment, right? You're You're a Second Amendment supporter, so do you support the whole Second Amendment or just the half that the judicial cases have proved you have, even if the first half is non-existent? We don't have that well-regulated militia that we need for our free state. Do you support the whole amendment or not? Is a legitimate question, Mr. Where you go to look this stuff up. Is it really super abstract what I'm saying? I don't think so. I support our founding fathers with the idea that there's a relationship here, that it's a whole amendment. I don't support using the first half to restrict the second half. I support them both helping each other. And the part that is the pride at the moment is the part about the well-regulated militia. Obviously.
Doesn't guarantee you a private right to own your own militia. Like, it's not an IOU that you can take to, like, the do-drop-in militia. Hey, I've got my IOU. Okay, there you go. Yes, I was told to be valid here that you take it. It's a voucher kind of thing. I know that vouchers are controversial, but this is an old one. It's good. Okay, so I just like to change that in and get my own militia. Thank you. Actually, I shopped around. I got they're in the card here. All right, thanks. Oh, yeah, come on, little John. You too. Oh, get in there. All right. That's not what's meant by.
Maybe it's time for a little bit of work on that, okay?
Air and opportunity. That's all. That's between you and working on your own private militia.
Okay, remember the question is, do you support you're supporting the Second Amendment. You are using that in this conversation. Do you support the whole thing? I can go try to make a militia, and in fact, in a way, I am right now by advocating that. So, we don't have it. You're the one that tells you should shut up. I didn't say anything like that. So I'm not saying shut up about this or about that. I'm advocating for a militia. Well, you could go be part of one. Really? Is it that easy? I think it might take a social attitude or something, you know. No, the malicious people that are out there forming things that they call a militia right now, that's what you mean, Piero. No, it is not.
But, be that as it may, everybody wants to draw a line somewhere. Nobody says people can have nukes in their backyard.
Well, that's because normally you want to detonate them in the air, you see. Just a better dispersal pattern. Just kidding. What, too soon?
I just want to say that I did not understand that part at all.
We want to have a principled argument that we can get huffy-puffy about. Well, if we're really, we're really trying to do, everybody, where to draw the line. Well, of course you can't have tanks. Well, some people say, well, of course you can't have assault rifles. And then other people are like, well, there's no such thing. Everything can be in an assault. A knife could be an assault rifle.
You actually know someone who said a knife can be an assault rifle?
No, I don't. I'm sorry you took me literally. Integral math. What can I say? I thought my tone of voice and demeanor about it made it clear that it was a hyperbolic satire on, people saying, all rifles are assault rifles. I thought that was obvious. I'm sorry I confused you.
Having a major pain moment here. Fee, fi, fo, fum. What beanstalk you fall from? Except, what dumb tree you fall from, something like that. A knife could be an assault rifle. Okay. Don't forget the assault laser sharks we talked about.
Trying to figure out where to draw the line. We're going to end up categorizing weapons.
I think we should definitely draw the line between rifles that shoot ballistic projectiles and knives that are actually assault rifles, because that is just dash cunning and sneaky.
And all sorts of things like that. And you can't go, well, you can't be abridged. But we all know it should be abridged.
It doesn't say abridged, it says infringed. Just so we're clear.
Okay, we're clear. You're pedantic. Fine. Follow up that pedantic nature of yours with something. Okay, infringed, abridged, restricted. What's the nuance you're hinting at? Are you hinting at an actual nuance, or is it just a thing?
Certain point, and we'll be arguing over that. We need the particular point. So unless somebody wants to come along and say that we can have shoulder mounted rocket launchers and carry them around in the street, open, unconcealed, weapon.
Well, just while I have you here, just in your imagination, what would it look like to carry a shoulder mounted?
Mounted. Well, see, integral math, I'm not a gun fetishist, so I like to just talk loosely. Now, as a matter of fact, shoulder mounted is a term. You're probably thinking shoulder fired missile is the correct term that all of we masturbators about guns, or I don't know, I'm just assuming. Mounted. I don't get your point because you said mounted, not shoulder fired. Or who knows what you're thinking. And then on top of that, you're going to take joy in my knife that's an assault rifle and my concealed rocket launcher, and you don't think I saw anything comical in those images. That's just you managing to take pleasure in the ludicrous. Me, that's the world I live in. Shoulder. Okay, but it's funny.
Rocket launcher, concealed. You just like stick that under your jacket there, and hope no one notices the big tube hanging out the back or the rocket on the front, or how you, depending on which way you point it. Just what would a concealed rocket launcher look like?
Law. Then you agree there's a line somewhere, and we're arguing over where the line goes.
Yes, and people like me are arguing that the line is drawn between arms within the meaning of the people who framed the Bill of Rights, and things that would not be that, or what are called the lineal descendants of that.
Finally, a fucking issue and a point. Where do we draw the line? Well, I would like to use this concept of the kinds of guns that our founding fathers have presented. This is me being This is me being integral math. Where we also make allowances for the fact that the kinds of guns they understood as arms, like not a warship, but as arms, they have lineal descendants. That should be a lot easier to define than, say, what an assault rifle is. And we're getting down to the brass tacks. The problem is, obviously, I am open to some more regulation, and you are against that. And I'm saying things that might make it seem reasonable to say things like, oh, we don't need 100-round magazines or whatnot. But what you're not taking into account, and you ought to, is that I think if we had a well-regulated militia, it would get pushed in the other direction. The Overton window would shift in the other direction. We would have people that could have 100-round magazines, and it would work together. It's a whole amendment. That's a real issue.
Like nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, weapons that instead of being for point targets are for area targets, like your concealed shoulder-mounted rocket launcher thing.
Appreciate that you answered that question. Right, so because it's an area destructive weapon, a bomb on the end of a rocket, that could be prohibited. Okay, I could see that. I hope you would see my point that if we had a well-regulated militia, some people could get permits for things like that. But I take your point.
You guys resort to principle not because it leads you to a solution, but because it leads you to a perpetual conflict, and that, I suppose, is what you really like about it.
Cool.